Initially, the Company of New France ruled French Canada through a governor-general appointed in Paris, and the government had no representative assembly. Legal matters fell within the governors, which were French nobles appointed to govern the colonies of New France, but legal disputes were handled poorly due to the governor's arbitrariness. In 1663, however, King Louis XIV took control away from the company and made New France become a royal province. In the following year, the custom of Paris was formally set as the official source of law in New France. The royal judges and the king's attorneys were required to be thoroughly familiar with these laws, which govern aspects of daily life in New France such as property, marriage, and inheritance. In 1665, the king sent a French garrison to Quebec, which reformed the colony along the lines of the French government, with the governor-general and intendant subordinate to the minister of the marine in France. Eventually, the French colonies became tightly subjected under the French monarchy.
Initially, in the 16th century, French attempts at settlements in Nova Scotia and Newfoundland had failed due to native resistance and poor financial planning. It wasn't until the 17th century that the French started to establish permanent settlements. Samuel de Champlain founded Quebec in 1608 and was later followed by Robert Cavelier, who claimed the entire Mississippi River Valley for New France. Eventually, France expanded their territory into what was known as French Louisiana, with the settlements of New France being located in areas along the St. Lawrence, Mississippi, and Ohio rivers. However, despite such a large land claim, the settlements themselves were relatively small. The settlements were based upon the fur trade, and as a result, the majority of the settlers were white fur traders looking for money who lived in forts with trading posts.
The economy of the French colony centered around fishing at first, but later transitioned to the fur trade based out of what is now the city of Montreal. The French formed alliance with the Native American tribes in the process, notably the Montagnais, the Algonquin, and the Huron, under leadership of Champlain. Not only did the natives know where the fur was, they also made good trading partners. This industry greatly stimulated the economy of the French colonies, making the settlements trade-based.
The French colony expressed themselves through Christianity. However, Samuel de Champlain, an explorer and important figure to the early history of New France, strove for religious toleration, having a radical belief that Native Americans were not intellectually nor culturally inferior to Europeans. And following this narrative, any natives who had been converted by the Jesuit missionaries retained a high degree of independence. It was more common, in fact, for a Frenchman to adopt the free life of Indians than it was for natives to become accustomed to the French ways. The French's strong desire to create a colony based on the mutual respect between diverse peoples allowed them to maintain a relationship with the Indians, which produced trading alliances and more Catholic converts. This desire, however, has since been neglected. Due to the diseases brought over by Europeans, specifically smallpox, the native population was severely weakened and virtually diminished after the Iroquois attacks, and in present day, much of the native culture has been lost. To what began with a small white population, New France prospered into an engaged community which promoted and respected diverse values, the extent of their success being strongly dependent on friendly alliances with local Indians. Similarly seen in the Spanish Empire, New France witnessed immense cultural exchange between colonial and native populations. French traders and Indian women in the Upper Great Lakes region in French America, for example, encountered each other often and began to wed and have métis, otherwise known as children of the particular relationship. As a pastime, aside from encouraging Indians to adopt the labor division between men and women, the French taught métis games of skill and chance such as billiards. The new families of métis were also educated on the native families' languages and traditions as to keep the native culture alive. However, as the métis moved further away from home and to trade and wed, the cultural interchange the French believed in thinned and is now not nearly as prevalent in modern education.
Although traces of French colonial influence can clearly be seen in Canada, the French colonies also had more impact on the United States than meets the eye. The territory of French Louisiana was eventually sold to the United States in 1803, which doubled America's territory and was one of the first steps in helping America extend its geopolitical power. Believe it or not, a dialect of French is still spoken in Louisiana today, called Louisiana French, and the speakers are descendants of the original French colonists. The French's belief in Catholicism is still manifested today, since a portion of the Catholic population in the U.S. are descendants of the original French colonists. Cities such as Detroit, St. Louis, New Orleans, and states like Vermont all have names deriving from French origin.
The French colonies' emphasis on economy and business can reflect the modern-day definition of America based on being able to work hard and making it big. For the French, it was to make money. Their definition of liberty was not only to pursue their dreams, but to also participate in free market economy and be able to freely trade.
They viewed land as private property since they had seigneuries, or estates owned by French nobles. Their priority of trade also meant that resources like fur were property that could be sold and owned. Despite their culture being somewhat more individualistic than that of Native Americans, they still valued the community since they allied with tribes, which showed that they still valued teamwork and helping others.